So the fourth and final game of the October 2013 LSAT tells us that a naturalist will give 5 lectures, each on a different type of bird: oyster catchers, petrels, rails, sandpipers, or terns. It then tells us that the lectures must be given either in Gladwin Hall or Howard Auditorium. So if we're not in Gladwin, we must be in Howard. If we're not in Howard, we must be in Gladwin. So we notice we have an advanced linear game here. Not only are we placing these 5 lectures, we need to consider whether they're taking place in Gladwin or Howard. So let's turn our attention now to the conditions. The first lecture is in Gladwin Hall. Well, pretty straightforward. It then tells us that the 4th lecture is in Howard Auditorium. It then tells us that exactly 3 of the lectures are in Gladwin. Well, what that means is that we have 2 more Gladwins to place and 1 more Howard. So we have 3 Gladwins, 2 Howards. The 4th condition tells us that the lecture on sandpipers is in Howard Auditorium and given earlier than the lecture on oyster catchers. So our 4th condition here is telling us that the lecture on sandpipers is in Howard and taking place before the lecture on oyster catchers. So now we know oyster catchers can't be first and it can't be second because the first lecture is taking place in Gladwin, which means it can't be sandpiper. We can also conclude from that sandpiper can't appear in the 5th spot because then we wouldn't have room for oyster catchers to be after it. And then our 5th and final condition tells us that the lecture on terns is given earlier than the lecture on petrels, which is in Gladwin Hall. So the lecture on terns is earlier than the lecture on petrels, which again is in Gladwin. So we know petrels can't be in 4 because 4 is Howard, and we just were told that petrel is in Gladwin. We know that T can't be 5th, and we know that P can also not be first. So you notice the only options now for our first position here are R and T. And that would be the setup for this game. Before we proceed though, I just want to draw out the possibilities in terms of what we could see for our 3 Gladwins and 2 Howards. So since we know Gladwin is obviously first here, we could go 3 straight Gladwins, giving Howard 4 and 5. Another possibility would go Gladwin in 2, Howard in 3, Howard in 4, Gladwin in 5. And the 3rd and final possibility would be Gladwin, Howard, Gladwin, Howard, and then Gladwin.